What happens when two civil engineers in Alaska get together and they decide to grow a civil engineering company together? Well, you're going to find out in today's episode. I have with me Garrett Gladshow and Lucas Chambers of proHNS in Juneau, Alaska, and they're going to give us kind of the secret sauce that they've found to growing a civil engineering company. It's something that they do with their staff, with their clients, and with each other that has really helped them to grow. But before we dive in, first, a word from our sponsor. This Civil Engineering Entrepreneurs series is brought to you by Big Time. Big Time is the industry-leading PSA software providing time tracking, billing, and project management for engineering firms, with the goal of getting your business back to business. You can learn more about Big Time's PSA solution at bigtime.net. All right, now I'm excited to welcome our guests onto the show today, Garrett Gladshow and Lucas Chambers. They are co-owners and principal engineers at proHNS out of Juneau, Alaska. Gentlemen, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Anthony. We're humbled to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to have you. I can't say we've had someone on the podcast recently from Alaska. Just for whatever reason, I know it's, I actually went there and spoke there once for the local engineering societies, and they told me it's a little bit of a challenge to get people coming from the lower 48, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place. I was thrilled to be there, and I hope to get back there. So, Garrett, why don't you start us off here and tell us a little bit about how you ended up starting the firm? How did the firm start?
Well, my journey with the firm started in 2016. I had been working for Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities here in Juneau, and I had an opportunity to partner up with a former partner who's no longer with the company in this venture with proHNS. At the time, he was a sole proprietor working out of Haines, and kind of the idea was I was going to come aboard and start bringing our Juneau kind of clientele and operations up to speed, and see kind of where the opportunity took us. I was always interested in getting back into consulting. I'd done that earlier in my career, and the opportunity presented itself in 2016, and I couldn't pass it up.
That's great. And Lucas, tell us how you got involved, where you got involved.
Yeah, sure. I actually also, was working for the Department of Transportation here in Juneau, and that's how I ultimately met Garrett. And we had become friends kind of through work and outside of work. And Garrett left and kind of started this company, and was kind of keeping close tabs on him. And he's kind of like his expertise and his partner's expertise was more in kind of the construction side of the business. And I was a highway designer for DOT, and so I kind of had this design background, AutoCAD, Civil 3D training, and they identified a need for their company to have that kind of design side was a service that they weren't providing at the time. And so kind of when that first small project opportunity arose, and kind of hemmed and hawed and with the wife, and decided this was a good time at a young age to kind of take a risk like this if it didn't work out. So I decided to ultimately leave the Department of Transportation and join Garrett and Jeremy as a partner of proHNS. And shortly after I joined, Jeremy actually resigned and relocated to Vermont to be closer to his family. And this kind of actually opened up kind of a window for me as, taking on a larger role with the company, and, really helped establish, our Juneau office here and kind of our client base, locally. And, as far as kind of some of the services, proH provides now, we offer a range of civil engineering, design, permitting, materials testing, and construction administration and inspection services, for both public and private sector clients. So
Great. And, Lucas, you mentioned there, kind of talking to your wife, assessing kind of the situation and the risk and whatnot. talk about that for a minute, because, this is a series we're talking about, civil engineering entrepreneurs, starting a company, growing a company. Did you think of yourself as an entrepreneurial person, or was this just something that, looked appealing to you in terms of a career opportunity? Talk to us about that, Lucas, and then Garrett, I
Sure.
want to hear the
Yeah,
same from you.
that's a great question. And I, kind of think about that back on, did I have this entrepreneurial drive? And, when I was young or going to school, and to be honest, I didn't feel that about myself. But, I had kind of reached a peak of where I was at, and, working for the Department of Transportation, and just was kind of ready for something new. And at the time, I was actually 29, so felt pretty young. And, if we getting in on the ground floor of a company felt like an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and working with people I like to work. And, kind of in the back of my mind was, well, if this doesn't work out here, even in the next 5 years, I'm still in my 30s, and I can, regroup somewhere else, and I haven't lost a lot. And so it was pretty fun. I actually got a call there from Garrett, and my wife and I were on our honeymoon in Scotland. And so, we had a lot of time to really go, we were kind of doing a road trip. So we just had a lot of time to go over the pros and cons, and kind of really evaluate that risk, and ultimately, decided that, it was worth it. And I'm really glad I did. I haven't really looked back. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And how about you, Garrett? Did you find yourself as an entrepreneurial type?
I grew up around it. My father was a small business owner for a lot of years, kind of a bit of a self-made man. And he had kind of preached to me young that, if you ever have the opportunity to be your own boss, do it, and don't look back. And, I kind of grew up with always having that in my back of my mind to end up in a position like I am now. It definitely came along a lot earlier than I was expecting. And I think a lot earlier than a lot of folks kind of get a chance to experience. But, it definitely took a big leap of faith. I remember, when I was, Jeremy and I were talking a lot about, whether or not I was going to join the firm. It was a conversation that happened over the course of nearly a year before I finally made that decision to jump aboard with him. And, at the time I left DOT, I had 3 weeks of work with proHNS. That was it, 3 weeks of billable hours. And then I was going to be out of work. So it definitely took a bit of a leap of faith to leave that salary kind of job with the DOT and run with this. And it's funny, I had the same conversations with my wife about the pros and cons and the risks. And, she ultimately kind of said, hey, this is the kind of opportunity you came here for, you moved to Alaska for, let's take it.
That's great. And it's, we have a lot of listeners that are probably thinking about starting their own civil engineering company. And I think no matter how many times you hear it, it's just good to hear it from people that, they took a risk, that it is a risk. I mean, make no bones about it. It's a risk, but at the same time, you only get to have one career. So you got to kind of make the best of it. And if there's an opportunity, sometimes you have to jump on it. And, the other thing about it is that I think that there seems to be, there's always a balance. Like I think the real big positive of doing this when you're younger, to Lucas's point, is that, probably you have less to lose at that point, right? You don't have, maybe if someone's starting out maybe in their 20s, maybe they don't have kids or, other responsibilities, and they can kind of take that risk. Some people will say, when you're older, you have like some more business experience and it might be easier to, to then build a company. But I tend to err on the side of, the younger you can give it a shot, the better, just because you have more time to readjust and, adapt. And, like Lucas said, if it doesn't work out in 5 years, I'm, 34, 35 years old. I still have my whole career ahead of me. So, and I think the fact that you guys were a public agency probably has really come back to help you. And we could talk about that maybe later, but I think that having that perspective is extremely valuable. So, all right, so let's jump in here, talk some business here. Garrett, people are obviously a critical component of building any business, especially a civil engineering firm where you're constantly dealing with people, consultants, agencies. Talk to us a little bit about, your perspective on the importance of people development at your firm, how you find people, how you develop people, how you retain people. Talk a little bit about your philosophy around that.
Well, and I think this is one area where Lucas and I are really synced up, and it really comes down to, people are our greatest resource for any company, but especially for an engineering firm that's providing consulting services. At the end of the day, the product that we're quote unquote selling our clients is professional services, and the quality of that product you're going to provide is highly dependent on the quality of the professionals you have working with you. So, people are huge. Lucas and I talk about it often. proHNS at the end of the day is just a name. At the end of the day, the services we provide, the reputation we build, and the opportunities we get comes because of the fantastic staff we have that's part of our team. It's been interesting getting the opportunity to work with so many great people and develop our staff. We recognize we need folks in key positions, and we try to develop people into those positions as well as seek out new hires for those positions. But it really starts with understanding those roles we're trying to fill.
So being really organized around what your needs are as a company in terms of the people that you need in your company.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And looking for opportunities to, get people into the right position. And, a lot of for what we do for recruitment and, bringing people aboard is really based on word of mouth. We do, post jobs. We use the nationwide recruitment sites, just like everybody else. And we do have some folks that have come to us through those tools. But really, the network and word of mouth connection has been how we've gotten a lot of folks into our team.
Great. And that kind of leads us well into the question that I wanted to ask you next, Lucas. As a civil engineering company grows, there's ultimately going to become more seats available. Kind of going back to what Garrett said, when you start the business, it might be, you two doing, most of the different tasks, the marketing, the business development, sales, the project delivery. But as time goes on, you're going to need to fill these different roles. So, how do you go about ensuring that you have kind of the right people doing the right things, and that you make those adjustments? What do you guys do to kind of to look into that as the company grows and grow with it?
Yeah. I mean, we have experienced that situation, and then we are currently, experiencing that very situation of adding new positions. And as we've seen the company grow, we have been able to afford, I guess, to add new positions and specific roles, such as like a human resources or marketing, just directed towards just providing, that for the company. And what we've found is, sometimes those people have come in the door and we've put them, on a job like doing bookkeeping, and then found that, just through working with them, that their skills are maybe more suited to, a human resources type of field. And honestly, how we've been able to kind of identify that is just, with talking with them, regular check-ins, is this, do you like what you're doing? Are you interested in this? And through those conversations, we've kind of, found people's strengths and weaknesses, where their, kind of passion lies, and have even shifted people around that we've already hired for one job and then put them in another position, and then, hire someone to come in and manage just the books, and then find that, they, have some background in IT, and we can kind of utilize that resource. So, sometimes we'll shift duties around, from our positions to other positions, to kind of line up with people's skills. And honestly, that's coming from just some open communication, and Garrett and I talking with each other about, what we're seeing, but also, talking with the employee. And, during the interviewing and hiring process, you're always trying to identify the hardworking, talented people, but, sometimes that full skill set doesn't come to light in that short period of time. And you kind of see these things, in at daily work and stuff. So, that's kind of, how we have been able to kind of move people around and promote them into the right position, is that open communication. And one comment that, we talk about with potential hires, and amongst ourselves, analogy we like to use is, we're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And so we we try to make that, very apparent to when we're bringing people on board, is like, what do you want to do? Because there's a good chance that, we can make that happen for you. So it's been interesting that way for sure.
So just one follow up to that, Lucas. Have you guys sought out any kind of business coaching or mentoring or other entrepreneurs to help you with any of this, or is this something like specifically this issue of scaling and finding people in specific positions, or is it more like you said, you, Garrett, and your staff just having open and honest conversations to this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's as far as reaching out, and been pretty lucky to kind of connect with some other local, civil engineering business owners that maybe have just retired and now aren't, direct competition, and been able to kind of bounce some, ideas off of, and they can kind of see themselves in us too, maybe kind of growing up, and have, been willing to kind of share some of that, their experiences and kind of how to do that. So, it's kind of building that network, and kind of feeling that, getting comfortable with other people that get them to willing to share kind of some of their insight about how to approach things. So I think that's, been helpful in that process.
That's great. Okay, Garrett.
I was going to say, I'd actually like to add to that, in talking about those resources. One thing we discovered here in the last couple of years and have taken advantage of is the mentor protege program, all small mentor protege program through the Small Business Administration. So we've actually entered into a mentor protege agreement through SBA with a larger civil engineering firm located in Washington, who's not direct competition with us. But for part of that program, that's really allowed for us to bounce ideas off their resources and bring them aboard for everything from benefits discussions to hiring practices, recruitment, marketing, things like that. It's been a really neat experience to have that mentor firm with us, and we've been utilizing them as a great resource here in recent years.
That sounds like an amazing resource. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm sure some of our listeners might want to look into that. Is that something you guys just found out on your own, or?
Well, actually, we connected with this firm through some market research of business opportunities, and so I, began developing kind of a relationship with a project manager there at this firm, and from that relationship, it led to them actually bringing to our attention this small business mentor protege program. And the big benefit to the mentor, I would say, is that as a small business, we can now go in after federal contracts as a small business joint venture where we're the prime and they're the sub under our mentor protege relationship. So it's a great program. I would highly advise any small business that's looking to expand their resources and knowledge base to consider looking into it.
That's awesome. And one of the things I just want to mention here that I think this episode will really bring to light is one of the things you have to think about when you're starting a civil engineering company that's very important is your geographic location, right? Any constraints or limitations or opportunities that are brought about by that. And I say that because, of course, Lucas and Garrett are located in Alaska, which presents many challenges and I'm sure opportunities as well. But every business, especially civil engineering, I mean, a lot of our work is very related to the environment and with our surroundings. I know that's something that you really need to consider when you're planning for your business, thinking about seasonal issues or challenges, thinking about opportunities or specific types of projects that might be readily available in your area. We haven't talked about that much during this series, but being that you're both from Alaska, in Alaska, that's something that I know from visiting there myself. Those are things that you really need to be aware of. And we can get into that a little bit, but I think one of the things, and we talked about this before we started today, is obviously the climate and how that affects your construction season. And Garrett, maybe you could just mention that just quickly here so people understand that one of that limitation for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're in Southeast Alaska, and folks that have been to Alaska probably would understand, but for those that haven't, Alaska is a huge state. We're actually closer to Seattle than we are to Anchorage. Kind of hard to believe, but that's, where Southeast Alaska is. But even here where we're located, yeah, we're not in the frozen tundra, but nonetheless, our construction season really is about May till October of each year. At that point, it's just too wet, too cold, too much snow, and really our construction pretty much shuts down. So most of our projects are hit it hard. When we do have our construction season, we're out there, 7 days a week, working 6 months nonstop, with the exception of a few holidays. We're just really trying to get as much work done as we can in that short season.
Yeah, that's great. And Lucas, just to follow up to that for you, I would imagine too, in terms of hiring and finding people, you have also, certain geographic, not limitations. Someone, I guess, potentially could come further away, but, you're kind of out there away from the lower 48 to some degree. So I would imagine that that's a factor.
Oh yeah, definitely. And just throughout my career and working for some government agencies, and I've seen a lot of people come and work for a year and leave. And honestly, the weather, the darkness, the winter has been a factor that, they just couldn't handle, didn't really grasp, moving here. So when we're looking to hire people, it's always very important for me to, if they're coming from somewhere else, that, we try to make sure they understand what they're getting into from that side. But yeah, I mean, always, a big plus is someone that's local, lived here, or, potentially has family here and has a reason to be close. But yeah, that's probably one of our bigger challenges for recruitment is just our geographical location, But we kind of supplement that with some exciting projects and exciting experiences, and getting to travel to kind of cool locations that are pretty off the grid. And some people like that, some people don't. So
yeah, I when I was there, I met a older couple retired, and they told me that what they do at this point in time is they spend their summers in Alaska and their winters in Hawaii. And I kind of was thinking, who's got it better than them? Because, obviously we all know how beautiful Alaska really is, and you get those long days in the summer. And we know what Hawaii is as well. So, but again, it's just I wanted to make the point that you, as a civil engineer out there, if you're thinking about your business, you need to be really aware of any of those limitations and opportunities around your region, especially if you're someone who might be not from that region, and you need to learn about those, because there might be a learning curve there that you may not be aware of, that I think is something that you really need to think about and learn. All right. So Garrett, getting back to the development of people, right? We talked about people. You mentioned they were your greatest resource. How do you kind of identify the needs in terms of their development that they might need, whether it's training or mentoring? Do you have some kind of process, or, how are you focused on the development of your people in there as they progress in their careers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of just to step one back, really the key, I think, first and foremost, is to develop the right people. You have to be willing to let the wrong people go. Now, that sounds pretty harsh and maybe contrary to what we're talking about, but the reality of it is, as a business, as an owner, as a hiring manager, you're not going to hit it out of the park every time. Some hires just won't be a good fit for your culture, or just won't be a good fit for your needs. And if that comes up and you've given them ample opportunity to correct or redirect their skill set or otherwise through open communication, you still need to be willing to let that person go. It's really going to be better for both parties in the long run. And that's really important, I think, because that allows you to then focus on the people that you want to develop that are the right people. Put your resources into them. And, when it comes to job training, comes to skills development, we really look at it as two different categories. First being, what is job required training or job required certification? So if we're going to send you out to the field to test structural concrete for slump and air content, you better be ACI certified or equivalent. Also, real common one, I think most everyone sees in the industry, is erosion and sediment control training for staff. That's a very common one we see for job required trainings. But otherwise, we kind of look at the other half of it as selective training or selective skills development, where we put that burden back on the employee to really identify what they want to do and are passionate about. Now, we try to encourage that as best as we can. We commit to training budgets at the end of the year, but we would much rather pay 5 times the fee training fee for an individual to take a course they're passionate about, rather than to bring in a course for the entire company just in the interest of getting CEUs. We found that folks that are passionate about the conference or training or certification they're pursuing is going to get a lot more return on our investment in that training.
I think that's a great philosophy. And, to your point, you're clear on the technical types of certifications and training that you'd like someone to get that line up with their job responsibilities. But on the other end of the spectrum, if there's other skills that they feel that they want to develop, that they're passionate about, you kind of give them a leash to do that, and some, obviously, the budget and the investment to do that, which is great. Having that emphasis on that, I think, is really important. And going back to what you said there in the beginning, I think that keeping someone on board too long, that's, it could be dangerous, especially when you're talking about a small company where kind of every single person on the team plays probably a pretty big role and does a lot of different things. You got to make sure you have the right people. And it sounds to me just so far, between some of the things that you and Lucas have said, that you guys are very open from a communication standpoint with your staff, with each other. And I would imagine, Lucas, that's really, really been a key for you guys in terms of being able to grow.
Yeah, I would say definitely. And for me personally, I think that's, I benefit from, an open communication, talking stuff through with people, hearing myself say something out loud often, allows me to solve that problem in my head without even getting the feedback, so I think it naturally, is something that I need to do to, kind of figure stuff out. And so I think that has just seeped into the company culture of, us just, being very open and communicating with our staff and not trying to hide our knowledge, so.
I think that's great. And maybe, a couple of years from now, we'll have to reconvene and have another episode and see how it is as you scale a company, maintaining those lines of communication. Because I would imagine it could be more challenging, but I would also imagine that starting it this early is a real positive, which will make it easier to kind of create a culture around it. I think it's one of those things that you kind of need to get it going kind of early on to make sure that it kind of permeates the company and the culture, and go from there. So, Lucas, I want to transition here a little bit and talk about, company or business problems. I mean, problem solving is obviously essential in what engineering leaders need to do. We talked about maybe some of the challenges or issues that you guys need to deal with on a regular basis, but how do you kind of identify, or the company as a whole kind of identify problems that arise so that you can tackle them kind of quickly and efficiently?
Right. Yeah. I mean, just we kind of keep harping on this and bringing back to this, but like I just kind of said, it's that communication with Garrett and kind of thinking through those, saying stuff out loud and thinking through stuff. So, often, we're very engaged throughout the day talking about, okay, company to-do lists and, just kind of how our projects are going and sitting down and talking through that, or, while we're grabbing a cup of coffee or something. And, it's having, identifying like individually, it's like, okay, here's what I'm seeing. It seems like, we have the potential to be losing some staff members because, we aren't offering the right benefits. Garrett's, come back, I've been kind of thinking about that as well. And so, maybe we were individually each kind of in the back of our minds kind of stewing on something, and then by getting it out in the open and having that reaffirmation from a business partner, and allows us to kind of realize like, oh, maybe something we internally thought wasn't as big of a deal. Well, maybe this is something we need to take a closer look at and address sooner rather than later. And so, I think that, having that business partner, I know particularly for me and kind of that back and forth and getting a different perspective has been extremely valuable, and so I would, certainly recommend for other people trying to start a business, if you do have someone that you trust that kind of is in a similar line of work or can bring their own skill set, having a business partner really helps kind of share that load and, allows you guys to, work together to solve problems, or I guess, more importantly, identify them. Is you have to do that before you can solve anything. So I found that to be the most beneficial.
Sounds like a marriage to me. Which I think business partners, in a sense, you are married, but so Garrett, let's kind of dig into that a little bit more. I think this is an interesting component of what you guys have been able to do here is, keep the lines of communication open. So, which, Lucas kind of described here, but talk to us a little bit more about the details of that. So do you guys kind of get together every day? Like, are you located in the same office most of the time? Talk to us about how you guys actually communicate.
Yeah, well, I mean, my office right now is right next door to Lucas's, so that's a big plus. And oftentimes, as Lucas has mentioned, we are friends outside of work. We were friends before we were business partners, so that also kind of offers other opportunities outside the office to discuss issues we might have. We're actually both dog owners, so that's a great opportunity for us to take the dogs for a walk after work sometimes and talk about those things maybe we're not as comfortable talking about around the staff here in the office. Oftentimes, we'll find opportunities to maybe go grab lunch to talk about issues in private. Maybe we need to take a deeper look at. But, that communication really for us, when we have a problem which evidence, it's not evident what the solution is to that problem. It seems to me we often end up talking about, okay, the two ends of the life cycle of the problem. First we're talking about, okay, how did this problem originate? And then on the back end of that life cycle, we're talking about, well, how do we mitigate this problem in the future? And usually just by discussing those two ends of that life cycle, that problem, we end up finding the solution to that problem somewhere in the middle. So I think it's really good to just be able to have that, partnership, have that peer mentor, whatever it might be, to kind of discuss through these problems and balance it back and forth, because ultimately through those conversations, you're going to find the solution you're looking for.
That's great. And so for all those civil engineers out there that are friends that are thinking about starting a business together, it sounds like, and it could be different for other people, but it sounds like for you guys, the personal friendship has been a big benefit and a big value add to your business relationship, and being able to kind of be so, connected to each other in terms of your ability to communicate, your ability to address problems and think through things. It sounds like, Garrett, from what you're saying, that's been really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what really it boils down to is we have already established the trust before we went into business, and I think trust in your peers, trust in your partners, trust in your mentors. I think that is huge toward these types of conversations, because at the end of the day, you have to have comfort, bringing up a problem or discussing an issue with someone that you might not have that level of comfort with, outside of that relationship.
No, that's great. That's great. So, Lucas, in terms of scaling up a company now, you guys, I think, have been anywhere, probably sounds like from around 15 to 25 or 23 over the past year, a couple of years, and you're growing. Sounds like you've been busy. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing? Or, I'm sure you guys look ahead to some degree and say, listen, if we want to get to here, we're going to have to deal with things like this. What are some of the challenges that people can expect in growing a consulting firm that you've found so far?
Yeah. And we, kind of already touched on this. I would say that our biggest challenge, at the moment, is continuing to find, qualified, quality people that, want to work here in Juneau, or, in this climate. So I would say, finding that the resources for the company has been the hardest part. So far, keeping them here has not, once we've got them. But that would, bringing in those resources, filling out these specialty expertise has been challenging. And I think that, the geographical location is part of that. But also, another kind of challenging thing that we've experienced, after we kind of got over the initial hump of, okay, we're kind of looking at each other like, okay, we've kind of made it, we feel like it's less of like just trying to, stay alive. It's like, yeah, it is, how are we going to continue to grow and prosper? And so you're looking at work, and you're going after RFPs and trying to get as much work as you can. And one thing then, and especially kind of in this market where there is a lot of work and there's plenty to go around, it's kind of finding that edge of, where you've become too busy and you're overworked, and oftentimes I've found, how we're finding that edge is by stepping over it. And so you are kind of, okay, we got to scale something back here, or we need to, figure out how to bring in more resources, outsource something. And so that's kind of been an interesting kind of, as the company has been growing, it's not like we can look back and say, oh, well, we've been doing this, level of business for 20 years and we kind of have a good feel, for what we can handle. And so, it's something challenging is, it's hard to say no, but, knowing when to say no is kind of, been something that we're, really in the last year or two, getting better at. And unfortunately, sometimes that is by getting too busy and finding out kind of where your ceiling is at the moment, and, how to kind of push past that, or decide, maybe we can't grow as fast as we want, so yeah. I would say those have definitely been some of the challenges as we continue to grow. And our goal is to kind of, continue to build and stay, create a stable company. So.
No, it's great. And it sounds like you guys are doing a really good job of it. And I'll tell you right now, from dealing with companies, civil companies across the United States, I think the problem is trying to hire, qualified people to keep up with the workload. It sounds like it's a real challenge right now, which is positive in terms of there's a lot of work. It's just, if you can't do it, it becomes a bottleneck. And so I think that's something that, kind of everyone's going to have to deal with in some way, shape, or form. And obviously, like you said, you guys have some limitations. I guess one other question that I would ask you, Garrett, is, which feeds a little bit off of what Lucas said in terms of having a lot of work, and sometimes you guys have to be really busy with that work. Being that you are seasonal with the construction the way it is there, I would imagine that while the construction season, you're probably running at 150 miles an hour to get as much done as you can in those, 5 months, I guess, 5 or 6 months. Does it allow you in the off months to do some more of the strategy and thinking and planning and stuff like that? Does it take a little bit of pressure off in those months as opposed to if you had to run for 12 months?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. We're definitely very, very busy in the peak of construction season, both Lucas and I. When you're in the middle of construction, right, nobody's willing to wait for an answer. Usually when the phone rings or the email blows up, they needed an answer yesterday. So, that always becomes your focus on active construction projects. And it's especially challenging for Lucas and I, because we are still a small company. And, despite being principal engineers and owners, we're still wearing a lot of hats. We're still directly involved in day-to-day decision-making in the deliverables and projects we're working on. There is not right now middle management in our company. We don't have a bunch of project managers we're leaning on. So we're still heavily involved in the day-to-day projects. So yeah, absolutely. I would say, for me especially, I've kind of here in the last month gotten into what I consider my little bit of a slower time, and over the next few months, this is going to be the time when I'm really focusing on putting a little more effort into marketing, business development, maybe updating the business plan, developing new network connections, things of that nature.
That's great. And so kind of moving towards wrapping up this first segment with Lucas and Garrett, and then we'll get into the career hot seat segment with them. But a couple last things here. Lucas, in terms of just thinking about advice that you would have for civil engineer listening, they're going to start their own business. Maybe they have a partner, maybe not. Either way, looking back on your journey at this point, what's like a big piece of advice that you might give them about becoming a business owner that you think would be helpful for them?
Yeah, I think, once you decide you're ready to make that leap and you can, you feel comfortable doing that. I know that's sometimes the challenge is, well, I always, I have more to learn, and before I feel comfortable doing something on my own. And well, I think you'll always have, more to learn and get into that comfort level. But, while you are, maybe young in your career and have this future ambition, it's, if you are wanting to start your own business, I think becoming a well-rounded engineer with, the basics, understanding of the basics of everything, like you don't have to be an expert, in materials testing, but, if you understand how that, what that job kind of entails, what you're looking for when you are hiring that expert, so I would say, just broadening kind of your expertise and not getting yourself, kind of forced into a specific, technical kind of understanding where you know how to design this one part, or you're kind of the expert there. I found that's been very helpful for me in the business, and but also kind of how we've tailored our business to be a more well-rounded civil engineering firm, so it kind of lines up that way. So it just kind of depends on, how what your goals are for the company. And I found that that's been the most helpful for me in the past, is kind of, rounding out my overall skills as a civil engineer.
That's great. And Garrett, how about you? What advice would you give?
Got to be willing to push the boundaries of your comfort zone, and kind of that follows with what Lucas is talking about from the technical side. But I think especially where you got to emphasize it is on your business and social skills. As engineers, I think we can all agree, and Anthony, I know a big reason why you're doing this podcast is, those social skills and interpersonal relationships and people skills, it's not something we're really taught as an engineer. It's not necessarily something that's been in the traditional industry to be brought up along with. So those are, for me, I think, two areas especially that I've had to develop even further in, and I really encourage a lot of folks to take a hard look at and recognize is, if you're going to make this leap of going out on your own, you're going to have to be prepared to interact with a lot of different people in a lot of non-technical settings, and you need to be prepared to handle those relationships.
That's great. And I'm going to ask you guys one more question here before we end this segment. And I'll start with you on this one, Garrett. A lot of civil engineers that might want to start their own company, one of the fears is that by no means is it like a 9-to-5 job.
Mm-hmm.
That's
absolutely correct.
There's lots of things you have to deal with. I'm just wondering, from a personal standpoint, how do you manage that? How do you avoid, you can't burn out because your company's not going to make it. So, how do you personally try to, stay focused on your business, but give yourself a little bit of relief so that you can stay fresh?
Early on, the highs are very high and the lows are very low. I can't even recall how many times early on in this business, something would come up and, at the time, like, this is it. This is going to close our doors. Like, we're done. We're not going to be able to move past this. And, I think you've got to understand and you recognize over time that, you really have to ride out those lows and not get too high when the highs do come, because there are going to be more lows. And eventually you're just riding that middle of that wave. And I think as time goes, I know, especially in the last couple of years, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with just leaving work at work and trying not to get too worked up about things I think are going to be something we can't move past. Because at the end of the day, as long as we're continuing to deliver good services, we're working hard and we're communicating with our clients, we always seem to move past those issues.
That's great. How about you, Lucas?
Yeah, I would say that's something I'm, continuing to work on and kind of figure out how to manage those things. I don't know if that'll ever kind of go away. But, a key thing for me is kind of, a judge of, what am I taking home with me? And at first I was working late evenings to try and get deliverables done when I'm the one responsible, and, trying to establish that client base and that trust there. And you are, working some late hours, and luckily that's started, has waned and is not, isn't required as much anymore. But, just kind of, I'm always judging is, even if I'm stressed out at work, I'm trying not to take that home and put that on my wife, or, let that affect, decisions I'm making to have fun. And it is a challenging thing. I don't have all the answers for that. That's kind of, it's something I continually kind of am working on and trying to, where is that line and how to draw it, and just kind of I think that will continue to evolve, as the company evolves, as I evolve, and, we continue to go forward.
I think we're all working on that, and we will be
Yeah.
working on that for the duration. But I think, Garrett, you made a great point in that, I do think early on in a business, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. I mean, I know at EMI a couple of times we said, I'm thinking how we making payroll, this time around. And then we go on a good run, really good run. And listen, I know if you're out there working for a company, you're an employee of a company as a civil engineer, you have stresses as well. You probably work a lot of hours as well, especially in the industry and the economy and the market we're in right now. But there's something about having to, come up with a payroll, especially if it's not just for you and for other people that are counting on it. It can bring a real added level of stress. But I do agree that once you can keep it going for some period of time, the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low. You get a little bit more middle ground, you get better at it, you get more experienced at it, you're able to handle a little bit better. But again, to Lucas's point, then the next challenge comes along, and then, you got to kind of buckle down again and, start to, figure out how you're going to deal with the next one. But it sounds definitely like you guys are doing a great job, and you have a great relationship, and you have a lot of good open communication, sounds like, between both of you and just in your company in general as a theme, which I think is excellent. And I think it's something that's needed, especially in the world that we're living in today, where there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of stresses and a lot of pressures that everyone's dealing with. And so I think the open communication culture is a good one. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back with Garrett and Lucas, and we're going to put them on the civil engineering career hot seat. Stick with us. So we are back. Once again, we have Garrett Gladshow and Lucas Chambers, co-owners and principal engineers at proHNS in Juneau, Alaska. They talked a lot about their business, how they've been building it, open lines of communication. We talked about some of the challenges that they have in their geographic location, of course, and, things you have to think about as owners of any company, especially civil engineering. But now we're going to put both of them on the civil engineering hot seat. You guys ready?
Absolutely.
All right. So, Garrett, let's start with you. Are there any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning routine, lunchtime routine, just something that you might do consistently on a daily basis that has contributed to kind of your success as a professional?
It's got to start with a hot cup of coffee first thing in the morning. That's for sure. But from there, I kind of generally come in, get settled, start catching up on my emails, getting those organized, laying out my priorities for the day. And then, a lot of times I'll start looking through the public agency procurement sites, the bid sites we continually follow, just to see if there's anything new that's popped up, see what kind of jobs are being posted. And, oftentimes I'll kind of end up going down the rabbit hole a little bit. If I see a set of plans posted for a project I'm not familiar with, and that set of plans has a firm on it I'm not familiar with, I'll start researching that firm. I'll go online, see what their online presence is, find out what they do. And, kind of might seem like I'm wasting that first half an hour or hour of the day, but really what I'm trying to do is daily market and industry research. I'm trying to figure out, who's our competitors, who's our potential teaming partners for future projects we might not have the skill set for, and just really trying to get a better feel for what's going on in our industry. And, Lucas and I talk about it all the time, but especially in this, especially being young, being a new firm, trying to get a foothold, we feel that knowledge of our industry and marketplace is real power, and we need to get as much of that power as we can.
No, that's great. And I love that philosophy, because to me, in the world we live in, things get busy when people get up and get going. So the earlier you can do some important research and stuff like that, I see that being real important. How about you, Lucas?
I have a similar routine in the morning as Garrett, but what I've found even more useful, helpful for me, mentally, is taking lunch at home. And so I only live a few minutes drive from the office, and I really like to go home, make some lunch, let the dog out, and just give myself a few minutes to relax, even if it's on the drive, there and from, and kind of, take a deep breath and just kind of regroup, middle of the day. Has really been helpful for me. And even if I'm out on a construction project and can't make it home, I try to kind of find some space, for a few minutes to just kind of eat lunch on my own and let me regather my thoughts and just kind of let work be, off to the side for a second. And, I found that as a really helpful kind of stress reliever and kind of lets me clear my thoughts and kind of be ready to tackle the afternoon.
No, it's great. I try to do the same thing myself, and I do find it kind of can re-energize you in a sense because, if you try to go at a high pace for such a long time, you just run out of gas. Your brain runs out of energy. So I think any time you can stop, refresh, refocus, that's a good thing. All right. So Lucas, let's start with you on this one. What's one book that you might recommend? It doesn't have to be specifically related to engineering, but maybe a book that you found helpful in your professional development, personal development, and growing a business. What's a book that maybe stood out for you? Do you have one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, to be honest, I haven't had a whole lot of time to read books lately. And when I do, it's usually a nonfiction book that's on vacation. And I just kind of let my thoughts wander. I don't have to really think too much on. So, what I do and what I would recommend is, I read the local news every day. And, I have found that this is, been very helpful staying up with, local projects, changes in city codes, and informs me kind of on local politics and kind of directions, that different things are going. And, I found this has been the most important thing for, running that business is kind of getting entrenched in the community and back to what Garrett was saying about knowledge is power. It's giving me that knowledge of kind of what's going on locally in our community.
That's great. I'm glad you said that because I do think, something that a lot of civil engineering business owners miss out on is the importance of being plugged into your community. I think it's really essential to what we do as civil engineers. And it sounds like you have a great way to do that. Garrett, how about you?
Well, I've actually got a recommendation that I heard off the podcast here, and I really enjoyed a few years ago, but Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I think that had some fantastic modern negotiating techniques in it, and it just really rung home with me.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing book, Never Split the Difference. And if you're out there and you're too busy to read, like I know a lot of us are, the audio book for Never Split the Difference is phenomenal. It's the guy was an FBI hostage negotiator, and so he's really takes you through every chapter in a different hostage situation, which makes it really an interesting and exciting read. All right, so Garrett, thinking back to a manager you might have had in the past, you don't have to name any names specifically, but if you think of a manager that you really like to work for, what was it about that person? What were the characteristics that made that person a good manager?
Well, I had a mentor right out of college that has always stuck with me, and actually we're still friends to this day. But, I think what really stood out about him was he was very personable. He made an effort to connect with his staff, sharing not only his work challenges, but also his personal life. And, I think because of that open communication and that relationship development we had there, we had a small office. There was, I think, just 4 of us engineers there at one point. And it just kind of developed a family type feel almost where, you were willing to run through walls for him if you needed. If you had deliverables that needed to be in by 10 a.m. the next morning and we weren't quite there yet, well, we were working late or even all night, and he was right there with us. And he just set a good tone and I felt like a really good leader in that regard.
That's great. That's awesome. How about you, Lucas?
Yeah, I would have to think back on, actually I worked with the Forest Service as a college intern. And I had my boss, I guess my mentor there, he was getting towards the end of his career, and but you could really tell he was still very passionate about his work. And I think a part of this was because over time he had been able to evolve his, position into what it was, and was given to do so, or was able to do so because, the quality of his work. So, this, to me, I saw this as a positive cycle of, doing good work because you liked what you were doing, and getting to do what you like to do because you were doing good work. So this is, this is a mentality of kind of taken with us to proHNS, and why we try to find and fit people into positions and roles that they're passionate about.
That's awesome. All right, guys, I got one last question for you. I'll start with you, Lucas. This is our civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you got into an elevator with a civil engineer, you had 30 or 40 seconds with him or her to give one piece of career advice in that short period of time, what would you say to that person, Lucas?
I'd say, don't be afraid to challenge yourself and, take on new projects that may push your comfort zone. I've learned the most in my career by being, forced to figure things out, and not just applying a standard or continually replicating, a simple detail, but it can be scary to start a project that you might not know what that final delivery is going to look like. And along the way, you really learn a lot, and it helps you develop, a process, a blueprint for kind of solving problems that then you can take, with you to the next project. And, at the end of the day, this is, I think, the best way to grow your engineering confidence and your engineering toolbox.
Kind of like starting a business will do that too. Push you behind your comfort zone. How about you, Garrett?
Be confident in your professional interactions, especially early in your career. That served me really well, and something I've seen others not do that maybe hasn't served them as well. And I guess, what I'm talking about is, for example, if you're out in the field, contractor comes to you and say, hey, what's this mean? How do we do this? I don't understand it. Well, don't respond with, I don't know. That's the worst thing you can say. Instead, respond with something like, I'll look into it and get back to you. Or let me take this to my supervisor and I'll follow up. Those latter responses, those I don't know responses they're never going to work. But those latter responses, you're going to get well received. They're going to be well received. They're not only going to build your confidence, but they're going to build the confidence of the people you're working with in your skills and your professionalism. And I think that can take you a long ways.
That's great. In fact, I'm actually reading a book right now that was recommended to one of our previous guests, Elliot Twig, called Power Phrases, which kind of goes to what you're saying, Garrett, and the way you communicate to people, the one-line phrases you use really can convey your confidence and how they react with you. It's very valuable. Well, guys, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. From time to time, companies tell us that people search them out to work there because they heard about them on the podcast. So I hope we can help in that way. If you're interested in,
hope so.
If you're interested in going to Juneau, Alaska, you've got a couple of great guys here that will take you maybe under their wings, and you can help to build the company there. But honestly, thanks so much for your time, guys. I think having professionals like you come on the podcast is really helpful for those engineers out there that are listening and that may want to take a step like you. So I really wish you the best in kind of building proHNS. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Anthony.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast on YouTube, produced by the Engineering Management Institute. We're always looking for new ways to help engineers become effective managers and leaders. You can view all of our content on our website at engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here for our weekly videos. Until next time, please continue to engineer your own success.